The Oracle Network. Look deeper.
Welcome to Brew Crime. I'm Mike.
I'm Beck.
And I'm Nina.
And we also have our guest still.
Hey, I'm Jamie, also known as Chatulus and MD.
Perfect. This is part 2 of Metal Crimes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Metal.
All right. Well, Beck, I think you're going to start this one, it sounds like.
Yeah, so just a quick explanation. The original topic that Mike had proposed was heavy metal, obviously, as you know from the last episode. And I am not into heavy metal, per se. So I wasn't, thrilled with the topic, but Mike is really into heavy metal, so I was excited to hear his story. I was talking to a friend, my friend Vince, about this, and he said, well, you should do heavy metals and let Mike do heavy metal. So Nina and I today will be doing heavy metals, specifically thallium.
Thalium. Sorry.
So thallium, for those of you that don't know, is a heavy metal that affects your nervous system, lung, heart, liver, kidney, and if eaten or drank, even for short periods of time, causes hair loss, vomiting, diarrhea. Basically, it deteriorates you from the inside until you die.
Sounds like a bad heavy metal band.
What?
Sounds like a bad heavy metal band.
Yeah.
Create and destroy you inside.
Yeah, From the Inside sounds like a dope metal name, for sure. From the Inside.
Taste the feeling
Of death.
Oh, I shouldn't be laughing at that.
Oh man, that chuckled me. That was funny.
Many sugary beverages can lead to an early grave, especially when someone is trying to expedite this possibility. So quickly before I get into who we're talking about, the pairing that I chose today was Eccentricity wheat wine. It's from Driftwood Brewery. And the bottle says, a quirky but oddly intriguing intersection of wheat, rye, and Amburana spirals. This potent libation knows it is right and will hide in the back of your cellar until it is good and ready. It's in 11.4%.
Wow.
Nice and light.
So beautiful. Look at how pretty it is.
Way to destroy Mega Destroyer.
Yeah.
I was like 10%. That's awesome. 11.4 just shows up.
Well, just so that we can
5%.
all flex our muscles here, the beer I started drinking is 12.9.
Oh.
How many have you had, though?
This is my third beer. Taste the feeling.
Yeah. For the beer, it is very it's amber in color. It smells very sweet, which is good for me. Not that I like a very sweet beer, but if it's going to be strong, I want it to be sweet.
Yeah.
Wow. It's quite sweet. It's not very effervescent. It's more smooth than refreshing. Have you had this one, Mike?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Did you want to say anything about it?
All I really remember was
how sweet it is, to be honest.
It was quite sweet. I remember that. But that's all I really remember about it, unfortunately.
I'm not sure what to say about it.
What style is it again? Do you remember?
It's a wheat wine.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. So barley wines are usually about the same percentage, right? It's, 10 to 15% alcohol. But barley wines are usually a much darker, like dark fruits and everything. Wheat wines are often a little lighter And barley wines, much like stouts, kind of hide that sweetness a little bit more because it's a little thicker. It's a little more dark fruit flavors and all that stuff where you don't get that out of the wheat wine. So, yeah.
The thought of drinking a sweet, thick beer makes me want to die.
A Thalium?
Okay. George Tripel was born January 23rd, 1949 in New York City. His father was a policeman and his mother was an elementary teacher, and they noticed very early on that George was gifted. While he was in college in the early 70s, he became convinced that other students were sneaking into his room. He wanted to teach them a lesson, so he coated his doorknob with hallucinogens that could be absorbed through the skin.
Oh, jeez.
Badass.
I think that seems a bit hasty.
Yeah, that's a little rough.
But, I mean, why one-up someone when you can, 100-up them?
Just to add to that, I saw this thing of, as someone growing up and being as a teenager, I was taught that, when strangers offer you drugs, it's no strangers have ever offered me any drugs. So he's giving out free drugs. So he's the person we're worried about.
Yeah. Later on, he was on a road trip with a friend of his, and they picked up hitchhikers and gave them brownies laced with drugs, not without telling them, just to see how they would react. So, not creepy at all, for sure. So it didn't take long for George to escalate to making and selling methamphetamines. And in 1975, he was arrested in Charlotte, South Carolina for running one of the largest meth labs in the southeast U.S.
Wow.
So, gifted, but I'm not sure that he's applying himself in a way that is actually useful.
Probably not.
Yeah. So he served 3 years in federal prison for that. And when he was released, he was living a clean life. He met and married a fellow Mensa member. Her name was Dr. Diana Carr. Do you guys know what Mensa is?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a social group for genius
Yeah.
level people. So the article that I was one of the articles I read when I was doing my research said, quote, "Both of them were very intelligent, and George was passive enough to allow Diana to pursue her career ambitions without much conflict." End quote.
What?
Oh, he allowed her
What year was
to
this
be
again?
a doctor. Oh, okay. How generous.
By his grace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a nice guy.
Yeah.
Fuck.
So this would have been in the 90s. So it's not it's not the 50s or something.
Yeah, I can
Anyway.
see that shit being said in the 50s to 70s, maybe.
Yeah. Anywho, so George and Diana lived next to Perilyn Carr, which isn't Pi is his name. I'm not going to be using his first name because it's too complicated, if I'm being honest. Anyway, Pi had no relation to Diana. They have the same last name, live next to each other, just a fluke. And Pi lived there with his son, Travis. And in 1988, he married a woman named Peggy, and she moved into Pi's house with her son, Dwayne. And then they renovated the garage that same year so that Pi's daughters, Delana and Tammy, as well as his granddaughter, Casey, could all move in. So from now on, I'm just going to call them the Carr family. But needless to say, it was a very full house. So George and Diana went from having these two quiet neighbors to then living next to 3 generations of this mixed family, right? Lots of kids and a granddaughter. Significantly more noise pollution, needless to say.
Mm-hmm.
They also got family dogs, so loud music, barking dogs, 4-wheelers, firecrackers. The kids were all teenagers at this time, so it's not exactly everyone's best behaved time of life.
Yeah. I thought the neighbors upstairs here were annoying.
I know, right? I mean, my upstairs neighbors aren't bad, but we all know how I feel about my downstairs neighbor.
Yeah.
I mean, we did do an entire episode on bad neighbors.
Yes,
so.
we did.
Yeah. Yep. So there were times when it seemed that the teenage car boys were actually trying to piss off the neighbors. Like their actions were solely to piss them off for their own entertainment, which is just, it sounds like something a teenager would do,
Yep.
but don't be an asshole. So in March 1988, George had Pye cited with a zoning violation for converting his garage into an apartment for his daughters and granddaughter because he hadn't actually bothered to get permits for that. It cost the Carr family a lot of time and money to complete the renovations because blah, blah, blah. You have to completely halt renovations if you don't get a permit, but that's your own fault. Don't be stupid. So the incidences became more and more heated. Like it was just an escalating neighborly bullshit, you know? George even threatened to kill one of the Carr children, though. Like that's how escalated it was becoming.
Wow.
Yeah, and as if all of this conflict wasn't enough, Pye wasn't exactly the most loving and doting husband. Peggy had caught him cheating with an ex-girlfriend less than a year after they got married. She took the kids to a hotel and left a letter for Pye at home suggesting that give serious think about what life would be like if the kids and her weren't there anymore. You get the idea. Like, just a lot of pressure and stress on her in general.
Yeah, for sure.
So they were separated for a time, and Peggy and the kids moved out. This was a definite wake-up call for Pye, and he asked them to come home. Was he really willing to stop the cheating, or was he planning on solving the problem in a different manner, like an illegal manner?
Well, I mean, we're talking about brew crime here, so
Yeah. So the day that Peggy and the kids moved back into the house after being gone, like they were separated, the day that she moved back in, he left for a hunting trip. Like,
wow.
way to show your
Really?
commitment, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was while he was away on this trip that Peggy first became ill. Coincidence? I don't know. At the end of the trip, he returned home and told the kids that she probably just had a virus and not to worry about it. He was sure it was no big deal. But when it reached the point that Peggy couldn't move, like at all, she couldn't even open her eyes. Like she's just laying in bed, can't move. The children insisted that Pye take her to the hospital. And this was in like October of 1988. But before that, like she was vomiting and in agony, and he was just like, probably a virus. Don't even worry about it.
That's awful.
So after a few days in the hospital, she seemed to be on the mend, so she was released. And once she was home again, matters only became worse. Peggy's daughter tried to tell Pye that Peggy needed to go back to the hospital, but he said she'd be fine and left to go to work. Her kids decided to take her to the hospital anyway. And that first day back, a doctor noticed that she was losing her hair. And because of this, he suspected thallium poisoning because there's not really a lot of things that cause you to lose large patches of hair, right? So thallium poisoning is extremely painful. It causes peripheral nerve damage that can feel like numbness or pins and needles, or even like fire in your extremities. Like,
Oh, God.
basically, it just feels like your skin is on fire or you're being jabbed with burning pins. It can cause severe stomach cramps, vomiting, diarrhea, and general weakness and confusion. So just like the worst way to die. And it's slow. Thallium poisoning was confirmed the following day when her urine tests came back showing that she had 20,000 times the natural amount of thallium in her body.
What?
There's like a certain amount of thallium that your body can manage, and she had 20,000 times that amount.
Is that number none? Because It's just
extremely, extremely, extremely small.
That's what I was gonna say. It's like there is a thallium level we're supposed to have in our bodies. Like, holy fuck.
totally.
That shit's not supposed to be in your body, but
Yeah.
your body can handle a certain amount of poison and get it through
Yeah.
and out. But this was 20,000 times the amount that your body can handle.
Yikes.
Jesus.
Yeah. So Travis and Dwayne, her sons, began to exhibit symptoms as well, so they were admitted to the hospital. All three were treated, but it was too late for Peggy. She fell into a coma and eventually succumbed to the poisoning in March of 1989. It's like would have been an unbelievably large amount of pain over she went in October and didn't die until March. So she would have been in agony that
Oh
whole
my
time.
God.
Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah. So with the amount of thallium in her body, there's no cure, but Travis and Dwayne continued receiving treatment for their symptoms and slowly regained health. Dwayne was hospitalized for 2 months and Travis for 6 months. Further testing was done on the rest of the family to see if anyone else was poisoned, just to make sure. The presence of thallium was found in Casey and in Pi, but it was only like trace amounts. So they were fine. They weren't even hospitalized. In November, samples were collected from the household to see if they could determine where the poison came from, like how it got into their house, how it got into their bodies. So many items were tested, and it was determined that the thallium had been secreted into the house through Coca-Cola bottles.
What? Really?
Yeah. So that's why the title of the story was an actual Coca-Cola ad.
Yeah.
The tie-in. I love it.
Yeah. So it was glass bottles at the time, and the bottle lids had microscopic tool marks on them indicating that the lids had been carefully removed and then replaced.
Oh my God.
Yeah. The police were able to trace the bottles back to the point of sale because of the lot number, and it was easily determined that the likelihood of the bottles being poisoned at the manufacturer was like nothing. It was clear the officials needed to figure out who could have had access to the bottles after they were purchased and would want to hurt Peggy.
Could you imagine being the detective that figured that out?
Well, I mean, it's usually the husband if he's left alive, or whoever the remaining living spouse is.
Yeah.
Forensic files.
They're definitely the first person to look into, yeah.
It's just wild, though. That's so wild.
I mean,
Yeah.
divorce is an option. Just putting it out there for anyone
I know,
listening.
right?
Marriage. So much easier than finding glass Coca-Cola bottles.
Every time I see a story like this, I'm like, why didn't you just get a divorce? Like, just get a divorce. The problem is that these people really think that they're that much smarter than everyone else. They really think they're going to get away with it.
It's also, divorce was frowned on, not like murder.
Yeah.
Divorce was frowned on, though.
Yeah. Divorce may not be cheap, but murder means you're going to stay in jail.
I think, as someone who's been divorced, I think my likelihood on Tinder matching with someone saying divorce versus ex-con, I'd go with fucking divorce. And then I mean, considering I'm in a very healthy and happy, loving relationship now, I'm going to say for me, divorce was the way, not poisoning or murder or any weird shit.
You wouldn't be in a happy relationship now if you had poisoned someone and murdered them.
No kidding.
I have a sneaking suspicion that if my Plenty of Fish profile said ex-con, I don't think Stephanie would have asked me out. Like, never.
I think you aged
Pretty
yourself by
pure.
saying Plenty of Fish.
I know. Well, whatever, as if I care.
Yeah.
We all know that you're the youngest, Nina. Okay.
I like to remind people of my youth as I sit here with my back just fucking exploding. It's like you've been sitting for fucking more than 45 minutes. Get up and stretch. I am one with the youth. Trust me. Actually,
If you're saying the youth, not as young as you think you are.
I was
Yeah,
talking
the
about
youth.
being
Oh,
cool,
shit.
like shortly, like not that long ago. And I said, I feel pretty hip. And my boyfriend was like, you just said fucking hip. You are not hip.
Yeah.
You're old. I'm like, it hurts. Like, I don't appreciate the tone, but he's not wrong. But yes, I describe myself as being hip. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyways, sorry. Go ahead. Divorce is an option, guys. Disclaimer. That's where that segment was going.
Yeah. Yeah. So it wasn't looking good for Pi. He had financial motive and the opportunity to poison the Coca-Cola bottles. It was also so fucking sketchy that he delayed her access to medical care. But on the other hand, George Tripel was right next door, had so much knowledge about chemicals, including thallium specifically, and had directly threatened the family in a letter. That was the letter where he said he was going to kill one of the kids. Calm down, buddy.
Yeah.
So it was obvious that further investigation was required. It was decided that Special Agent Susan Gorek would go undercover to find the truth. She attended a Mensa murder weekend that Dr. Carr organized. That's Dr. Carr, George's wife. So they would host like a murder mystery weekend where they would run the whole, and it was for Mensa members only. And Special Agent Susan Gorek was a Mensa member, like a different chapter, not part of their chapter. But anyway, you get the idea. So she attended this weekend and befriended George. So it was George that wrote up the pamphlet for the event, and it included someone, like one of the characters in the weekend was someone that had written a threatening note and then poisoned the recipient of the note. And it's like, that's a little bit close to home, I think, George. I don't know if you want to be so obvious.
Mm-hmm.
So during the weekend retreat, Susan discovered that George and Diana were selling their house and offered to rent it until the sale went through, because I guess they were having difficulty selling it. So she was just going to move in and rent. Yeah, so once George and Diana moved out, then Susan moved in and brought a search team with her because they'd left a bunch of stuff like in the garage and whatever. The investigators found a bottle of powdered thallium in the garage, as well as a machine that could recap Coca-Cola bottles or any glass bottles, really. But that's pretty telling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you're a
Smoking
home
bottle.
brewer. Unless you're a home brewer, that's pretty telling.
Yeah, for sure.
So motive, opportunity, and possibly a murder weapon. In April 1989, George Tripel was arrested and charged with 7 counts of poisoning. So now it wasn't looking good for George. The prosecutors presented excerpts from his journal where he wrote about ways that poison can be used to kill people. He even listed the ones that couldn't be detected in a regular autopsy, and thallium was on that list. So there was only 4 weeks of testimony, 6 hours of deliberation, and the jury found George guilty on all counts. So he was sentenced to death on March 6th, 1991.
Oh,
Obviously, he appealed, but in 1993, Florida Supreme Court upheld the conviction and the sentence, and he tried to get his case heard by the U.S. Supreme Court in 94, but they declined. Diana defended him for years, but in 1996, they divorced.
Because that's an option.
Because that's an option, exactly. Right. You can break into the jail and kill him because you can just file some paperwork. It's not that hard. In 1997, the Federal Office of Inspector General cited George's case as an example of shoddy work that the FBI lab had been performing at the time. George found out about this and launched appeals citing that the lab work was crap and that a different lab should test the evidence found in his house. which is completely fair.
Yeah.
I mean, if this case is being used as an example of what not to do, I would say that's grounds for appeal. Unfortunately, it was retested by a different lab, and they got the exact same results. So judge after judge came to the same conclusion. Yes, the FBI lab did some shitty work at that time, but the work that they did on his case was still accurate. While the prosecution acknowledged that the case was circumstantial and George has never confessed, they were still sure that he was guilty. And Susan, the woman that had moved into his house, she was still quite sure. But here's the thing. This is just me playing devil's advocate for a second. It was Pi that originally suggested George and Diana as possible people who would want to hurt his family. And it was also him that made them aware of this like anonymous letter that they received threatening his family. But why would George want to kill someone from the family? If what pissed him off so much was that they were shitty neighbors, he'd already moved. These weren't his neighbors anymore.
Yeah.
So, like, problem solved.
That's like deep-seated resentment for sure.
Oh, yeah.
If possible, yeah. Like, I get what you're saying. I know what you mean.
So, sure, him and his wife were pissed about the noise, but, like, they'd already moved. Therefore, no need for murder. And, like, Peggy's kids, the initial person that they suggested to the police was Pi. And they only started investigating George and Diana because Pi said, I think it was the neighbors. So, I mean, obviously, what do I know? It's not like I was there. I was a kid when this happened. But
Yeah.
it's
It's a weird blind spot, though.
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah, for sure. That's weird.
So George is actually, as far as I could find, is still in prison awaiting the death penalty. And in Florida, he holds, like, he's been awaiting the death penalty basically longer than everyone else in Florida.
Wow.
Just because of, like, that huge gap and then reason for appeal. And then, yeah, so he's still waiting. But I don't know. I'm not so sure if it was him or if he's just the fucking weirdo that lives next door and has some anger management issues.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
That's my case. And I just want to say this is a Forensic Files episode, and it's a really good one. Nina,
I think I've heard about it.
Forensic Files not being on Netflix anymore, but you can still see some episodes on Amazon Prime.
Quite a few.
Not that Mike would know, since he doesn't
He's
watch.
never watched Forensic Files.
Well, I did look when you said that it was off of Netflix and it was on Amazon Prime. I did that much.
Yeah. So that is the Coca-Cola Killing, I think is what it's called for Forensic Files. Something like that, anyway.
Let me just do this one more time then.
Always Coca-Cola. Yeah.
Yeah, now it's always Coca-Cola or something, but yeah.
Always
So
Coca-Cola.
Taste the Feeling of Death. Taste the Feelings
Dude,
logo
Taste-
was the one that I could find.
Yeah.
Yeah, Taste the Feeling's way darker, though,
Yeah.
with respect to the
Taste the
Taste the
feeling.
of your hair falling out.
Yeah, it really most suited my purposes, that's for sure. I have a suspicion that they mean you can tell it's broke because it's so effervescent, but for my purposes, it was Taste the Feeling of Death.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Big time. Yeah.
Anywho, we'll get ready for Nina next.
Mean.
So before I talk about my story, I'm going to talk about my pairing. So last time we recorded, Mike had mentioned that maybe I should not get a pairing if I'm just never like it, because I end up literally having a sip and then throwing the beer down the drain because I don't drink it. So that was my intention going into the liquor store. Then I ended up buying a 12-pack That's a lie. My boyfriend paid for it, but we ended up buying a 12-pack of Sapporo, which I do like Sapporo, don't get me wrong, mostly because it comes with a really badass bottle opener. So Sapporo tastes like a lager. It's 5%. I don't know. It just is what it is. But how I'm going to tie it into my pairing is so similar to Beck's story. I'm going to be talking about poisoning, whatever. The serial killer I'm going to talk about, his nickname was the Teacup Poisoner. So I grabbed my teacup that I use, and I'm going to drink Sapporo from my teacup.
Nice.
So I'm kind of pairing it with my episode, but not really. There you have it.
Do you want me to play some evil music for you?
Yes.
Thank you. Anyway, so yeah, that's my pairing. I thought I was being pretty fucking clever. And I'll actually drink the beer. This is my fourth one since we've been sitting here.
Sapporo's a solid beer. Like I, you know me, Nina. I don't like lagers.
Yeah.
But it's a solid, very refreshing. It doesn't destroy my stomach like other actual lagers do.
No, I like it. I mean, anytime we're actually out at like a Asian restaurant, Korean barbecue, sushi, anything like that, always I will get Sapporo over like Kirin or anything.
Yeah.
I've never necessarily like bought a 12-pack to have at home, but I like it and I can definitely drink it.
Yeah, I definitely had it at sushi before.
Drinking it, so I'm a fan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk about Graham Frederick Young. As I mentioned, he does have a couple of nicknames. He was known as the Teacup Poisoner and later on as the St. Albans Poisoner. I don't know where the second one came from, but sure. I like the Teacup Poisoner mostly because it works with my pairing. I also feel like I've done
so dainty.
It does sound dainty, and then when I tell you what he did, he's a bit of a butthole. I also feel like I haven't done a story on a serial killer in quite some time, so I don't want to say I'm excited to talk about a serial killer, but I'm excited to talk about a serial killer. So a little bit of background before we get going and talking about his honestly just extensive criminal history. He was born in Easton in Middlesex, that's in the UK, September 7th, 1947, and nothing too exciting about his upbringing or nothing anyway that would lead me to see future serial killer in his, future. His mom passed away.
My guy too. He's only 2 years older and there's also no hint of serial or no hint of.
Well, I feel like sometimes when I think of serial killer, you have the three things you're looking out for, bedwetter, abuse with family, fire starter. Nothing necessarily nothing, right?
Yeah.
His mom passed away shortly after his birth. His dad did decide that he could not take care of him and his older sister. So he actually sent them off to live with other family members until he can get himself on his feet to have them, which I think is a good thing. It is tough as a child, but better to have your parent be present and do what's best for you than not. So he was sent to live with his aunt and uncles. A few years after living with them, he did eventually return to live with his father and his new stepmom, so his dad had remarried. From here, he went to school, graduated school, nothing crazy to report. At this point, he was showing a fascination to chemistry and just learning about different poisons and just the effects on the body. But it seemed more of his approach was not what it does to humans, but more of just how do we interact with it on our everyday. Like to the point where his dad even bought him his first chemistry set that he had at home that he played with.
Genuine investigative learning.
Which is a good and healthy thing. He's excited about the sciences and he wants to learn. Well, his dad was wrong. He actually was more interested in figuring out what certain poisons, what behavior, or how they interacted with someone. So similar to what Beck's guy did, he started poisoning his own family, but slowly over time. And he actually kept a journal to study the effects of how much poison he gave to who and how quickly they would react to it. So he's fucked up.
Yeah, he's doing a control test, but nobody knows.
Yeah, like a study, straight up.
Yeah. So he
Mhm.
considered himself like scientist. He just wants to find out what it is, and obviously he's a child. He has access to his family.
Wow. Sorry, like how old? You said child, but
14.
oh, Nelly.
Yikes.
When Ellie is right.
Yeah, no. So before I talk about what he did with his family, he did graciously or think that it was good to maybe just experiment someone who's not in his family. And actually, his first victim is Christopher William Christopherson.
Oh no.
Anyways, he
Why
did
do
not
parents
die.
do that?
Didn't die. Christopher was in his same science class, but he had vomiting, painful cramps, headaches, and it turns out that Graham was giving him different cocktails of different poisons just to see what would happen. Nothing good happened from it. Thankfully, Christopher did not die, and he was okay. From what he learned from his studies is when he turned his attention to his family. As I mentioned before, nothing really necessarily led to issues with his family, more just his curiosity of like, these are the test subjects that he has, so let's practice on them or let's investigate on them. So his father actually suspected that maybe accidentally Graham was poisoning the family. However, every once in a while, Graham would also get sick, which led them to believe like, okay, well, no, he's not poisoning us. This was never proven if he intentionally tried to make himself sick just to kind of point direction from him, like he's not the person poisoning it. At one point he did admit he accidentally drank the teacup he poisoned.
Oh, God.
So he did one time at least accidentally poison himself and not a family member. Mind you, he was microdosing them. So he just, from that one time, did get sick, but it definitely helped him avoid detection. Because if he was poisoning people, why would he also get sick?
Smart.
Fucked up, though. It's weird.
I'm not saying, yeah, wait, just to be clear, also fucked up, but smart. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it sounded like I was agreeing with him.
No, so...
They're not mutually separated.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. That's how you... Getting away with murder, 101. No.
Yeah.
Stab yourself slightly. No. Don't do that.
No one falls for that.
No one falls for that.
Like, have a victim stabbed 20 times, and then you have a mild surface scratch on your left arm.
It was
when you're
self-defense.
Like, you know you did it.
Like my guy had 23 stab wounds, 2 to the head, and he's like, well, it was self-defense. It's like, dude, you have no injuries? Like whatever.
Stupid. So Graham decided he was done trying to poison his sister and kind of studying the effects it had on her, that he turned his attention to his stepmom, Molly. Molly was nice. Seemed like a good integration of a new mom. I mean, it's not like there was some kind of bitter divorce. You know, his mom had passed away. His dad had no allegations of cheating on his wife or anything spicy. It's just a new woman he met after being widowed and whatever. So
Lovely woman stepping up to take care of another woman's children.
Couldn't find anything. I mean, not that people deserve to get poisoned, but you know, sometimes when you know an asshole and like they trip and fall, you're like, it's because you're a dick. Nothing like that comes in relation to Molly. So basically, he was poisoning her little over time. One day, Graham's dad came home and actually found Molly in the garden, almost unconscious. He took her to the hospital, and later that day, she had died. What was suspicious here is that Graham came up with the idea that they should cremate her body versus just going through the normal burial that like past family members have gone through. So the family didn't find it suspicious that Graham had suggested she be cremated, and her death was actually ruled due to the prolapse of a spinal bone. I don't fucking know what that means, but it was wrong.
Weird.
Later on, which I'll talk about, once he does confess to actually using thallium to poison his stepmom. So at least there was some kind of justice seen in that. Now, Graham's poisoning did not end here. I mean, I don't know if you'd say you'd think, but, he just killed someone. Maybe he would slow his roll, considering he's 14 still at this time. He did not slow his roll. He just started poisoning his dad now instead. So once his dad ended up in hospital, his dad did survive, but was started getting suspicious that, like, fuck, maybe it is Graham, but didn't want to turn him in. And it's okay, he didn't have to, because Graham's chemistry teacher actually noticed how much thallium he was checking out of the lab, and then put, like, 2 and 2 together at a light bulb moment of being like, hey, there's people dying, his dad's in hospital for poisoning, and called the cops.
Why do they have thallium? Like,
he was in advanced science. He was using it for his labs. And anyways, thankfully the chemistry teacher was at least on one and figured out, like, lined up the ducks in a row and realized, no, something's not right here. So Graham was quickly arrested and questioned, and he did end up admitting to poisoning his schoolmate, his sister, and his dad. He ended up being committed to the Broadmoor Maximum Security Hospital, and he was actually the youngest inmate since 1885, and he was sentenced to stay there for a minimum of 15 years. Now you think because he was sentenced for 15 years that this is where the story ends. It doesn't. You've got to consider he was 14, turning 15 when he was sentenced. 15-year sentence was, he's just 30 coming out. Now you're also assuming, which is what I assumed like an asshole, that he actually served his full 15-year sentence. He did not. But before I talk about why he was released, let's talk about what he actually did in prison. So,
okay, wait. From what I've read about Broadmoor, depending on my age going in and what year it was going in, I think I'd rather be dead than there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have read some truly horrible things about their scientific treatment for patients. Depending on when it was, I'd rather be dead.
Yeah, especially the prospect of 15 years of that? Hell no.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you say that. Graham, was one of the inmates you would not like to be locked in with.
Yeah.
Just a couple weeks after he was incarcerated, one of the inmates ended up hanging himself.
Oh, shit.
But it was because he was in such excruciating pain. And it turns out Graham actually went to the guys and being like, yeah, no, I've been poisoning him. So he didn't just fall ill. However, because he hung himself, they were like, no, you're full of shit, and ruled it as a suicide. So now you're going to wonder, how was he poisoning him? Because that doesn't make any sense.
Where would he get the poison?
They had some kind of fucking garden outside because of some scientific stuff that they were doing, where he actually, because of how smart he was, I guess, in his sciences, he figured out what leaves he can rip off the trees that had cyanide in them.
Oh, jeez.
Like
So, I'm sorry I'm laughing. It's not funny. But, like, really? You're growing poison in your prison. You're a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
So, he also ended up poisoning. Now, he didn't kill anyone in jail. Technically, this guy hung himself. Anyways. But he did get in trouble for poisoning fellow inmates, as well as some of the guards. He used something called sugar soap, because he ended up finding or getting access to some type of sodium dissolvent that's used in paint thinner in the hospital. And ended up getting his hands on that and poisoning other staff members and inmates. Having said all of this, in late 1960, he was assessed by the doctors at Broadmoor, and they had decided that he was, quote, cured, and he's free to return to the streets.
What?
He talked to one of the psychiatrists at Broadmoor before leaving, and he had mentioned that for every year he spent there, he would make sure to kill one person after being released. And they just thought, like, oh, it's just Graham being silly. He was not being silly.
No.
He did more bad stuff. So from here, he actually immediately leaving the prison, he ended up getting on a train, going to London to get more antimony, which is also a type of poison, and Valium. Now, he didn't have a controlled study group to actually use this because he didn't, like, he was homeless, essentially. But he was living in hostels. So the first victim that he met while he was back in the hostels was Trevor Sparks, who had a lot of the same symptoms of just cramps, feeling sick, headaches, feeling like he was essentially just rotting from the inside out. He did admit himself to the hospital, and after lots of testing, did get released. Now, there was another person that Graham had met also living in a hostel, whose name we did not get. This guy had very similar symptoms to what Trevor had, but due to just not being able to get the care that he needed, this gentleman, who, as I mentioned, like, couldn't find his name, did take his own life. From here, Graham ended up getting a job. Now, he got a job in photography. What's interesting about this is, considering what his niche was, working in photography, he actually got access to thallium. Thallium is used in processing photographs. So obviously he couldn't get a job in a lab or anything like that, knowing what his history was. These guys knew he was, in a maximum security, whatever hospital, getting the care, but didn't realize it was due to poisoning. Otherwise, I'm sure they wouldn't give him a job where he has direct access to poison.
Probably not. No, that would be a little bad.
No, and I mean, it turned pretty bad pretty quick. He first started poisoning his boss, Bob Eggle, and similar symptoms again: cramps, dizziness, just general, just like feeling unwell. He got sick to the point where he ended up being admitted to the hospital, and he did pass away in the hospital. Now, what was interesting is they had actually ruled his death as pneumonia at the time. From here, obviously, Graham didn't have access to his Bob anymore, where he switched his attention to another coworker, which is Fred Biggs. Fred started experiencing similar symptoms to what Bob was experiencing. Biggs also ended up in the hospital. However, he did succumb to it. So he passed away in November 1971. And in his death, they were able to determine poisoning. Now, this got the police interested in kind of opening up Bob's death and just doing more investigation on that, because what are the chances from the same workplace to unusual circumstances, similar kind of symptoms, which is where they were slowly able to deduce that it was poisoning.
Mm-hmm.
So Graham ended up getting arrested very shortly after Fred Biggs had died. And Graham actually, and I don't want to say took the high road, but just admitted his guilt to the police. So the first interaction he had with them after being arrested was like, yes, I did all of this. That's where he mentioned his stepmom too and all of that. Now, he ended up being charged for 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, 2 counts of administering poison. So what's interesting is now when he was actually charged and in the court in front of the judge, he pled not guilty. That didn't work well because when he originally pleaded guilty, he also turned in his journals because he kept journaling poisoned how much and what are these things he saw. So I don't know what he was thinking. Didn't work. He was obviously found guilty, sentenced to life in prison, and he died in August of 1990 from heart failure.
Oh, geez.
There wasn't any reports of once he was arrested again and found guilty and sentenced that he had poisoned anyone in the prison that he was held. I'm assuming they probably realized that he shouldn't be around other people or potential hazards because he's obviously smart enough to figure out how to fucking extract cyanide from a leaf. That probably they didn't let him play with a chemistry set inside prison this time around.
Probably not, yeah.
No. So, yeah, that's my story.
Yikes.
So young.
Oh, from 14 to serving to out, like, he was like 30-something when he was arrested again in like another life sentence, well, an actual life sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Wow,
but it was interesting.
So
I think
crazy.
Sometimes I think I like to find comfort in knowing why someone picked their victims. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, oh, because this person did this to you, or because you hate women, you picked her. I don't know. I'm not saying that it's a good reason, but something where this guy's just like, well, we work together, so you're the easiest person I have access to. It's like, fuck.
Yeah, no
Anyways,
shit.
Yeah.
then, you
Like
know.
it's slightly less terrifying when there's a reason, as
Yeah.
opposed to the random killers, and it's just like anything.
And I'm not saying I can make sense of all of the reasons, but at least like trying to like something. But
yeah.
like with his family, from everything you could see, is like he had a good relationship with his family.
Yeah, the difference between like, I know it's a flavor of the month, but like a Richard Ramirez to like, you know, the description you just gave, it's like there is like this indiscriminate killing versus like, okay, there's a methodical idea behind it, even though it's flawed and tragic. It's just still more palatable for some reason. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, sometimes if you think of like premeditated murder, or you think of like that act of rage and whatever happens, or what some people say self-defense or whatever, right? Like to poison someone over a long period of time and track the symptoms and know and see them in pain, like, you know, with his sisters and his stepmom, like, we're sick. And you're just at home like, yeah, I know why. And like just being a smart asshole, writing down notes, right? Like, I think that also adds a certain little spiciness to it, of just extra fucked upness. I don't know. So
Yeah, like it's differently terrifying when you either have a killer who is a random, like has no type, but it's not less scary to have someone who is basically performing deadly tests on their family, even though their family hasn't done anything. They're not like mistreated or anything like that. It's just like proximity.
yeah.
Totally.
Yes, I found it rather interesting, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, whatever. I don't know why he was let out again.
No,
Assuming that he was, quote, cured within a few months. He was already poisoning people in his hostel. Like, whatever. So yeah, that's our version of metal crimes.
Not good. Not good.
No.
Alrighty. Well, there is an announcement now.
Yes. So part 1 of this theme was for Mike and Jamie, and part 2 was for Nina and I. But the other announcement to be made, that this was actually, I hate to speak for Nina, but this will be our final episode for Nina and I. I mean, I just want to speak for myself and say that it's been amazing, and I was extremely grateful that Mike thought of me when he initially came up with the idea for the show. And like, I've had such a great time, and it was amazing to have Nina come guest on our workplace crimes and then continue on from there. It's been great, but I think maybe people that don't do shows like this don't realize how much work is involved in writing the not scripts. I don't want to say scripts, but it's a lot of research and a lot of work that we put into these shows. And I don't know, for me, with everything else going on in my life, it's become too much. And Mike's going to continue on with the show, which I'm fucking thrilled about, because then hopefully I can still come on occasionally, which would be my absolute pleasure. But to be doing it on the schedule that we're doing right now has become too much for me.
Yeah. And I don't want to say ditto to what Beck said, but, you know, feelings mutual. Definitely COVID has been, made me reprioritize and refocus on certain things. And yeah, I'm finding that it's, you know, it's been tough. It's been challenging, and I'm so happy for the little family that we've created. And obviously thank you to Mike and Beck for bringing me on, like almost 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that.
Wow.
So it's been a lot. There's been a lot of growth, I think, for us as a podcast, for us as just people and our families and everything that's going on. So thankful to have had this. And definitely Mike will have me maybe not talk about beer, because I pretty much hate all the beer we've always had, but something else, I'm there. But yeah, no, just super thankful for that. Thankful for the Patreon support that we've had, and all the people on the Facebook group who've just been so kind to us. And yeah, as Beck said, I'm super stoked that Mike's continuing the episode. and continuing the podcast. And, I hope he has more super duper awesome guests like Jamie come on.
Yeah.
Oh, ever nice.
That's the plan.
Yeah, I don't want to say more so I don't cry because I'm also drinking. But you guys, I'll miss you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got, for the next set of episodes, I've got a couple podcast hosts lined up right now. Not going to mention them yet, just so I can finalize everything. But I think what's going to happen for the next little while, every recording session, there'll be a couple different podcast hosts from different podcasts, and it'll change every time. And then finally, when COVID's done, I'm going to try to find some local hosts to kind of do it in person again. But until COVID's done, it'll be friends of mine from all over the world that are doing true crime podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
Or other podcasts, too. I've got friends in all kinds of different genres of podcasts.
Once we can get together in person again, I'd really love to get together, like to do a show with the three of us in person at least one last time.
Yeah.
But since we have really no clue when that's going to happen, we'll make it happen when it happens.
Yeah,
you know what I
no
mean?
shit. Yeah, 2020 what?
Yeah. Exactly.
Alrighty. So, to close this episode out, you can find us on all the social media at BrewCrime. You can hit us up at brewcrime@pacificbeerchat.com. You can find us at brewcrime.com. If you want to support us on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/brewcrime. And the money goes towards upgrading our equipment, making the show better.
And the supporters are
True Crime Nana, Daniela, Nina's mom, Three Beers In Podcast, Amber, and the Faves of Our Lives Podcast. Cheers.
Thanks, everybody.
BrewCrime's intro was created by Mike using Creative Commons Attribution licensed audio from purple-planet.com, soundbible.com, and freesoundeffects.com. Logo design was by Ben Greenberg. All cases and stories were written by Beck, Nina, and Mike, and our sources are put into the show notes for each episode. We always want to give credit to the people that research the cases we talk about. We can also be found on your favorite podcast apps, our hosts, Spreaker.com, or BrewCrime.com, as well as at BrewCrime on Twitter, at BrewCrime on Facebook, at Facebook.com/groups/BrewCrime. Thanks for listening. This has been a production of Pacific Beer Chat.
Hey there, Rainbow Warriors. It's me, CJ, host of Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBT. I have sprinkled myself with protective glitter and jumped upon my trusty unicorn to bring stories of the LGBTQI. Whether you belong to this community or not, I welcome you to take a listen to Beyond the Rainbow. I have all sorts of crazy, chilling, and horrifying stories I tell. It's available almost everywhere you listen to podcasts. Still not sure I'm worth a listen? Then check out my website at beyondtherainbowpodcast.com. And remember, it's not a crime to be gay. Unless you're a murderer.
Hi, this is Debbie Q. I'm the host of the Right Shoe Podcast, the podcast that deals with everything strange and unusual, especially in reference to a death. I try to deal with cases that hit me in a way that I can't stop thinking about them. I do like to stick close to home, which is Philadelphia, but some cases are just too good and I have to reach out. If you're interested in anything strange and unusual, especially in reference to a death, hop on over to the Right Shoe Podcast. I'll be waiting.
So George Tripel was born January 23rd. Cut that part out because I didn't do my pairing either. See, it happens all the time.
But not the same.
12%?
No. 6,
Okay,
8.5, and 12, and
Boros, and that's 15%. So by my logic, I beat you.
oh god, no, no.
3 5s.
I will be right back. I have to go strip the wax on the bottle.
No
Sorry.
worries.
I forget how many tools these wax require.
What you need is one of these.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nina, that's pretty cool, honestly. I don't think I've ever seen
I
one.
love it.
Sorry. One sec. What are you doing?
Homer.
Come on, homie.
Go.
Holmes.
Home skillet.
Sorry. Okay. In November, samples were collected from the household to see if they could. I already said that. Sorry. Put that out.
As I say, I don't feel burpy. That was from the pretzels, okay, not the beer.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So, I think Beck just died because she messaged us, Mike.
Yeah, I see that too.
Do you want me to hold off or just keep going?
Maybe hold for a second.
Okay.
She'll be right back.
At this,
Oh, hello. Hello, anyone there? Hello? Ah, shit. Hello? Hello? Anyone there? Fuck.
we lost Mike.
Oh, hey,
Yep.
are you there?
What's the last thing you heard?
It says Mike. Wait, it
Hey,
said Mike
hey,
is
hey.
starting to record. You good?
I'm here.
Where
What
we
did
lose
you hear
bro?
last, though, in case we lost you from recording?
Fuck.
Hey, Nina.
Excruciating. What's that word? Excruciating? Pain?
Excruciating.
Trevor, sorry, I misread that. Scratch that. So, I'm just going to go back, Mike. Trevor Sparks did not kill himself. So I just have to go back on that.
Okay.
I switch my sentences. Bib.
Well, then I
Bye. I'm just kidding.
Fuck off. All right. Do.
Sorry, I'm supposed to play there? I don't know.
Yeah, do it.
I'm just a guest. I don't know the beats.